I struggle with shame a lot. I've been disabled my whole life, and there has always been the sense that I am letting people down by not being able to physically do the things that I should be able to do. When I was younger and I would become injured playing sports all of the time, I would get very frustrated and I wouldn't understand why it was happening. And I also didn't understand why I was in so much pain all of the time. And then as I became older and I lost the ability to work a regular job and work a full-time job, I felt ashamed because I was supposed to be working a full-time job. I was supposed to be working maybe more than one full-time job. And I was not able to participate in capitalism in the way that I was raised to and taught to do. I've consistently felt from a very young age that I am just not doing enough. And everyone around me always told me that I just was not trying hard enough. I needed to be better, constantly striving to be better, constantly striving to push through the pain, push through the physical limitations, push through my body completely falling apart, and just somehow force myself to do things that my body wasn't letting me do. And now as I've aged and my conditions have progressed and I need to use mobility aids, and I've been using mobility aids for, I believe, 6 years now, I still feel shame around that because I feel as if I am tapping out or giving up, because that's what society tells a lot of disabled people. That's what many people in my family told me that I was doing. That's what other people around me told me I was doing, was that I just wasn't trying hard enough. And, using a mobility aid was giving up. And that was something that I struggled with for a very long time. And I should have been using a mobility aid much sooner, both according to my doctor and my physical therapists, but also just based on what my body was doing. And to keep myself safe, I should have been using one sooner, and I didn't. That was literally just because I felt so ashamed to be seen as a young person out in society needing to use a mobility aid. The point in my life where I needed to start using mobility aids was also a point in my life where I was extremely isolated. I did not have a support system, and I most definitely did not have a support system that was able or equipped to help me deal with the changes that my body was going through and the amount of loss that I was experiencing. In a span of about 3 years, I went from being able to use my legs okay enough to get around to not even being able to support the weight of my own body, not being able to control my legs, and not being able to feel portions of my legs. While a bunch of other really drastic and traumatic medical changes were happening to me, I was also trying to navigate, how do I get around? How do I care for myself? While having the people around me tell me that I just was not trying hard enough and I just needed to tough it out and do more somehow. One of the biggest steps that I took in accepting what my body was doing was actually listening to my doctors and actually listening to the physical therapists and taking their advice and using a mobility aid, because that helped me see just how much safer I could be, how much less pain I could be in, and how many more things I could do. And one of the biggest and most painful steps that I took in accepting my body's changes and also accepting the fact that I needed to use a mobility aid potentially for the rest of my life was I distanced myself from the people who were trying to tell me that I did not need a mobility aid, because they were not my doctors. They were not privy to my healthcare information. They would see me, maybe for 20 minutes every few months and pass judgment on things that they could never possibly understand, and hopefully that they never have to experience. So distancing myself from those people helped tremendously, because I did not have a bunch of voices and a bunch of chatter around me saying that I wasn't trying hard enough when I was in physical therapy for hours a day, every day of the week, when I was pushing myself as much as I possibly could, and I was fighting tooth and nail to keep the function that I did have. So while that was extremely painful and extremely difficult, because a lot of those people were family members, I felt like I had to be selfish temporarily and choose myself and choose my well-being. I won't lie and say that being a young person who uses a mobility aid is easy by any stretch of the imagination. It is not. Just the social implications of it can be very difficult, and especially for people who have social anxiety, it can be very, very difficult, because people will come up to you and ask you rude questions. People will come up to you and ask you very prying medical questions. One of the things that happens because of the area that I live in quite often is people will come up and they will put their hands on me and start praying for me loudly in public. So having to tell people to not touch me, while seems crazy and seems like something you shouldn't have to ask a stranger to do, it does happen quite frequently. While I am a young mobility aid user, I am also a service dog handler. So I do kind of tend to stick out like a sore thumb in many public places. I'm also on the taller end of the spectrum, and I do wear typically more like unique fashion. So people might be staring at me for a variety of reasons. That used to make me extremely uncomfortable. If I could be invisible, I 100% would be. But there comes a point where I so desperately want to be able to get out of the house and, maybe do some enjoyable things or be a productive member of society. And that tips the scales on, oh my God, people are going to stare at me. People are going to come up to me. People are going to bother me, to, yeah, but also I really want to live my life and I don't want ignorant people stopping me from doing that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that has helped me deal with the shame and the uncomfortability of being a disabled person in a society that is set up for abled people, is I just want to live my life. Because I've fought way too hard to stay alive, and we spent all this money keeping me alive. It would seem kind of silly and kind of wasteful to just give up and tap out just because people decided to be rude, just because they decided to be judgmental, because at the end of the day, it's not their life. What they say has no bearing on what happens in my life. If you know that you are going to need a mobility aid in the future, if you are a new mobility aid user now, or if you are a mobility aid user now and you're still very much struggling with accepting that you need one, I can use myself as an example. The quality of life that I had before I finally gave in to using a mobility aid versus the quality of life that I have now is astronomically different. Before I had a mobility aid, I could barely make it around my very small house. I was having to cling to furniture, hang on the walls, crawl. And now that I have the appropriate mobility aids and mobility aids that work for my disability and what my needs are, I can take a walk sometimes. Not every day, it depends on what my body's doing that day, but having the ability to say to my husband, I'm going to go take my service dog for a walk, and be able to go take a walk by myself is a massive improvement over just a few years ago. I also can be out in public with my partner or out in public with other people and be out of eyesight of them and have them know that I'm actually okay and I'm not just laying on the floor unconscious somewhere, because I now have a support team. My support team is an effective mobility aid and my service dog. Being able to do things like going into a doctor's appointment by myself, going into the grocery store by myself. I could have never dreamed of even doing things as simple as that a few years ago. So having a mobility aid and having even just that small level of freedom has been life-changing. I'm sure a lot of the able-bodied people watching this are like, well, those things aren't very big deals. To people who have been homebound, yeah, that's a big deal. To people who have completely lost the ability to do those things, that is very much a big deal. Anything that helps us hang on to independence is good, and mobility aids do that. Mobility aids increase independence, they increase safety, they decrease pain, and they just help us live our lives. Like right now, I'm going to go live my life. I'm going to go to the craft store, and I'm going to get to stay there for more than 2 seconds because I have an effective mobility aid.